Hey there. Thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, please hit that sub button and join the family. We're so close to 30,000 subs, and you can make that possible. Smash that like button if you enjoyed today's stories.
This is the worst date I have ever had. You honestly will cry after hearing this one, so buckle up. So I met this guy at Ria on this dating app, and he seemed pretty normal. Like, he had a solid bio, decent photos, nothing crazy, just a guy standing next to a plant, one in a mirror, one with him flexing. The usual. He messaged me first and was actually funny, which is rare because most guys just say, hey, and expect a novel in return. We talked for about a week, mostly dumb stuff like favorite snacks and conspiracy theories. He told me he had something fun planned for our first hangout. Said it was gonna be the London Zoo. I was hyped. I hadn't been to the zoo since I was like 10 and I low-key loved giraffes. So I get dressed like actually try this time. My makeup wore a cute top I hadn't worn in forever. I get to the train station where he said to meet, and he's already there, leaning on the sketchy little scooter thing, wearing a coat way too big for the weather. I should have known something was off because he gave me this weird side hug and mumbled, "You're gonna love this." But I just went with it. Figured maybe he was just nervous. We hop on the train, and I'm all excited trying to guess which animals we'll see first and joking about penguins being overrated. But then we get off at this random station that is very much not near the zoo. I ask him if we're walking the rest of the way, and he's like, nah, it's here. I'm thinking maybe it's one of those pop-up zoos or something, like an exhibit. But no, we walk through this quiet neighborhood, and he pulls up keys and unlocks a door. I'm like, dude, this is someone's house. And he goes, yeah, it's my ex's place. She's out, but I need to feed her cat real quick. I figured this counts as the zoo. And then he laughs. I laughed too at first because I thought he was joking. Like, seriously, who says that? But then he opens the door, and this orange cat runs up to us, and I realize he's dead serious. He literally goes, still counts, it's an animal. Welcome to the zoo. I thought he was gonna be in and out, but no. He starts taking his shoes off and tells me to make myself at home. I'm standing in this woman's hallway surrounded by pictures of her and him on the wall, some weird beach vacation ones too, and he's just casually opening cupboards and grabbing cat food. Then he says the most wild thing. Says he still lived here part-time. Apparently, they still share the bed for financial reasons, but I shouldn't feel weird about it because it's totally chill. I don't even know what face I made, but he noticed and was like, we don't do anything. I sleep on top of the covers. Like, what? That somehow made it worse. Then the cat craps in the litter box right there in the living room. Yeah, she had the litter box right under the TV like a side table, and he picks it up. With his bare hands, no scoop, no gloves. Just grabbed the little turd nugget like it was a piece of popcorn and walked it to the bathroom. He flushed it like that was a normal thing to do, then comes back out like he didn't just raw dog cat poo and tries to hug me. Says something about mission accomplished. I tried to lean away, but he pulled me in anyway, and then he leaned in like he was gonna kiss me. I panicked and said I had gum in my mouth and needed a second. I didn't, but I was not about to let raw cat poop hand guy anywhere near my face. I made some excuse about needing to get back to let my dog out. I don't have a dog, and he offered to come with me. I had to pretend I had a roommate who didn't like guests just so I could leave solo. Then he tried to make it worse by saying, honestly, this counts as the zoo. It's an animal. That's what I promised, right? And he was so proud of himself, like he'd just done me a favor. I didn't even know how to respond, so I stood there trying to figure out if this was a prank. At this point, I was so far past confused that I just defaulted to lying. As I was putting my shoes back on, he tried to hand me the cat so I could take a selfie with it. For memories, he said. I dodged that real fast and said I didn't want to freak the cat out, which clearly didn't care either way. I left that house feeling like I'd just been in some weird low-budget documentary about human mistakes. I could hear the voiceover saying, and this is where she knew she'd messed up. He texted me later that night saying he had a surprisingly intimate connection with me and that I had good cat energy. I didn't reply. I didn't block him either. I wanted to keep the text just to show people when they asked why I don't trust men anymore. Now, every time I walk past a pet shop or see a zoo poster, I think about that orange cat, that guy, and that godforsaken litter box under the TV. I've never read a situation so wrong in my life. On the train ride back, I sat in one of those weird corner seats, and just stared at the window for like half an hour thinking about how I could have been looking at gorillas or sea lions or something. But instead, I saw a man scoop poop with his bare hands in his ex's house where he still slept. Like, I just kept asking myself, why did he think this was okay? Why did he think this was romantic? Why the hell does he think a cat equals a zoo? He texted me later saying he had a great time and that his cat seemed to like me. I never replied. Deleted the app the next morning. Every time I see a ginger cat now, I feel like it's judging me. Like it knows. It started off already kind of weird because I wasn't even supposed to go on this date. I was dead tired, had a headache from work, and almost canceled like 3 different times. But I've already rescheduled once, and my friend just guilted me into keeping it. She said I was always bailing and that I'd end up with a fish tank if I didn't try. I don't even like fish, but point taken. So I showed up. This Italian place in the middle of the city. Not super fancy, but not a dive either. She picked it. Megan. That was her name. Blonde, curly-haired, big smile in her photos. She looked like the type who drinks matcha and knows 5 types of yoga. She messaged me first on the app, which doesn't happen often, and she had this sarcastic kind of vibe I liked. Her bio said she was a truth-seeking introvert, recovering optimist, part-time icon, which I thought was hilarious. We joked for a while about terrible first dates, red flags, and how we both thought pumpkin spice should be banned. So I got there right on time, like exactly 7 o'clock, and she was already sitting at the table, not looking at her phone or anything, just sitting, arms crossed, eyes locked on the entrance like she was waiting for me to pass some kind of vibe test. I waved and smiled, and she smiled back, but it wasn't like a warm smile. It was one of those tight-lipped ones that says, hello, but I'm already judging you. That should have been the moment I dipped. She looked the same as her photos, I'll give her that, but she didn't stand up, didn't go for a handshake or hug, just kind of gestured at the seat across from her. I sat down, tried to ease into it, asked how her day was going. She said, and I quote, better now that I'm not surrounded by men making decisions. I laughed because I thought she was making a joke. Nope, she wasn't joking. She launched straight into a full-blown monologue about how the world would be a better place if men just took a 100-year break from leadership, politics, speaking in general, like everything. I didn't even have my drink yet. I was literally just unfolding the napkin. She didn't ask me a single thing about myself. It was wild. She didn't even look at the menu, just leaned forward and started going in on how every historical downfall, every war, every disaster, every system collapse could be traced back to some guy thinking he was right when he wasn't. She didn't say some guy in a fun, joking way either. It felt like she was reading from a script she'd memorized on the train ride over. She called herself a gender realist, which I'd never even heard of, and said her goal was to reclaim spaces that had been taken over by masculine failure. I didn't know what that meant, but it sounded like I wasn't supposed to talk. So I didn't. I just nodded a lot, thinking maybe she'd get it out of her system eventually and we could pivot to something chill, like movies or pets. But no, she kept going. At one point, she pulled out a folded paper from her purse, like printed on actual paper, with bullet points about why male voting rights should be suspended. She said it wasn't even that radical. She said it was a temporary measure, like a political detox. And then, with a straight face, she asked me if I would be willing to give up my vote to show solidarity. Bro, I hadn't even ordered garlic bread yet. I tried to bring the energy down a little by saying something light like, well, I guess I picked the wrong day to be born a guy. Thought maybe she'd crack a smile. She didn't. She said, you didn't pick it. You benefited from it. There's a difference. The waiter came by and I swear to God, she turned her whole body away from him while ordering like he was a hologram. Didn't make eye contact, didn't say thank you. Just pointed at the menu and said this. I was tempted to tip him right then and there just for surviving that. After he left, she said she didn't trust male chefs either, but made an exception because she was starving and tired of moral compromise. That sentence didn't even make sense, but I nodded again because I had no idea what else to do. I tried asking if she had any siblings just to shift things, and she told me she had 2 brothers that she no longer speaks to. She said that they were casual misogynists because one of them dated his wife flowers and the other coached a little league team. That's when I kind of checked out mentally. The food came. I tried to eat quickly, thinking maybe I could make up an excuse and bail. But even mid-pasta, she was going off about gendered language and how the word man-made should be replaced with flawed by default. I almost choked. She finally asked me something, and I used asked loosely when she said, "You're not one of those guys who thinks feminism is about hating men, right?" And it didn't sound like a question. It sounded like a pop quiz I was gonna fail either way. I just said, "I think feminism should be about equality," and I set her off again. I didn't even get dessert. As soon as the plates were cleared, she stood up and said, "This was informative, like we were at some kind of debate camp." I reached for the bill and she didn't stop me. Said something like, "Since you guys have hoarded wealth for centuries, it's the least you can do." The bill was $46. I paid it. Honestly, just wanted out at that point. Outside, she didn't hug, didn't even say bye. She just said, "Try reading more women," and walked off, like into the night. I watched her disappear down the street like some weird anti-man vigilant. I read our whole convo later that night, trying to figure out where I went wrong, but there wasn't a single sign. Her texts were normal. Memes, jokes, casual flirting. Nothing that said, "Hey, I got a manifesto and a printout ready for our table." I unmatched the next morning. Every time someone mentions feminism now, my brain flashes back to that folded piece of paper sitting next to my carbonara. And now whenever I'd walk into a restaurant and see someone already waiting, arms crossed, I turn around and pretend I forgot something in my car.
Hey guys, really sorry to interrupt. If you're still listening, then you're enjoying the story so far. And if you are enjoying, then please hit that like button. That's all I ask of you. Thanks so much. Now back to the stories.
You ever get that weird vibe before a date, where your gut's just yelling at you to turn back and go home and order wings and call it a night? Yeah, that was me in the parking lot outside this bar downtown. It wasn't anything big, just one of those spots that tries too hard to look rustic. Fake brick walls, hanging light bulbs, bartenders with sleeves rolled up like it's a personality. I was 15 minutes early, which I never am, but I figured I'd grab a drink and not look desperate. Turns out I could come an hour late and still beat him. I'd matched with Daniel on this dating app that keeps showing me guys with backwards hats and bios that are just height and ask me anything. But Daniel stood out because he was funny in that dry way, like he didn't care if I laughed. And I'm a sucker for that. His pics were all concerts and dim lighting, and one where he was holding a cat that didn't look happy to be there. We texted for a bit. He didn't overdo it, which I liked, and decided to meet Friday night. I picked the place. He said he'd be there at 7. 7 came. I was sipping a drink, scanning the door every few minutes. At 7:15, I figured traffic. 7:30, maybe he's one of those people who runs on fake time. At 7:40, I was thinking of bailing. Right when I stood up to close my tab, in walks this guy, staggering just enough to make the bartenders clock him. I honestly didn't recognize him at first. He looked like someone who'd fallen asleep in his clothes and tried to fix it with cologne and gum. His hair was messy in a way that wasn't cute, and his shirt looked like it had been in a corner of his room for a week. He saw me, grinned like nothing was wrong, and made his way over, swaying just slightly like the ground wasn't solid. He dropped into the booth across from me, and I swear I caught the bartender already watching us, ready to step in. And I get it. Daniel smelled like he'd been pre-gaming this date with a bottle of something cheap and not good. Then, without even saying sorry or hi or anything normal, he launched into this whole story about how he was at his buddy's place. They were drinking, and someone dared him to match with girls and actually show up to a date. He said it like it was supposed to be funny, like I'd laugh and be impressed by how wild his friends were. Then he said something that made me freeze a little. He told me they were all watching the group chat, and he needed a few pictures of us together to prove I was into him. He literally held up his phone and asked if I could pretend to like him for the camera. Now I'm sitting there thinking there is no way this is real life. Who does that? Who says that out loud? And more importantly, who shows up drunk an hour late to a fake date set up as a bet, and then has the nerve to ask me to pose like I'm into it? He tried to explain it like it was all a joke. Said his friend was the one getting married and it was part of his groom's week dares, that they were taking off stupid stuff to do before the wedding. I'm staring at him, and I don't know if it's the alcohol in him or just how shameless he is, but he genuinely didn't think I'd be mad. He even laughed and said I was playing the role perfectly because I looked so mad. Like that was some sort of proof to his friends that the date was going well. At that point, I didn't even know what to say. I wasn't mad in the explosive way. I was more stunned. Like, this dude really wasted my time, came here drunk, and thinks I should be cool with it because he thinks he's funny. He kept glancing down at his phone like he was waiting for updates. At one point, he even asked if I'd take a selfie with him and wink, because apparently that would get him bonus points in the group chat. I told him I needed to use the bathroom and left. I didn't go to the bathroom. I walked straight out, got into my car, and just sat there for a second trying to figure out if I was actually mad or just confused. It was like the whole thing had been a dare for me too. How long could I sit through a date with a guy who treats people like background characters in some joke? On the drive home, he texted once. Said, "You could have played along, it was harmless." I blocked him, and that was it. I didn't tell anyone for a while, not because I was embarrassed, but because I wasn't even sure how to explain it. A date that wasn't really a date with a guy who was more committed to entertaining his friend than having a real conversation. Looking back, I think the weirdest part wasn't even the dare or the bet. It was how completely normal it seemed to him. Like, I wonder how many other girls that group tried this with. How many thought it was real. How many sat across from one of them thinking it could be something. I got home that night, threw on a hoodie, and ordered pizza like I should from the start. Watched dumb shows and forgot about him. I still have no idea if those pictures made it to his group chat or if his friends ever clowned him for getting ditched, but part of me hopes they did. At least enough to stop him from trying it again. So the weird thing is, I actually spent a decent amount of time picking my shirt for this one. Like, I stood in front of the mirror trying on different combinations of stuff, holding my phone up to see if the lighting in my room made it look wrinkly or if it was passable. It wasn't even a fancy date, just coffee. Midday. Chill. I was expecting it to be low effort. We matched on a Sunday night, and by Tuesday, we'd already made plans to meet at this cafe near my job. I figured we'd talk, maybe walk a bit if things felt good, maybe never see each other again. That's just how dating goes now. But I still wanted to look decent, just in case. Her name was Emily. She had this smile in our photos that felt kind of easygoing. Nothing over-edited, no weird filters. We didn't message a ton before meeting. She said she was busy with work and some stuff at home, but she seemed cool. Short messages, but they had some personality. I knew she had a kid because it said, "Mom to the best little dude" in her bio, which honestly I respected. At least it wasn't hidden. I figured that was just something she'd drop into the conversation later on, maybe explain more in person. What I didn't expect was to meet her son before I even got my coffee. I got to the cafe early, grabbed a table at a window, one of those spots with the high stools and those wobbly tables that always lean no matter how you try to fix them. I was 5 minutes early. She messaged me saying she was parking, so I was just scrolling on my phone when I noticed this woman walking and holding the hand of a tiny human. At first, I didn't register it. I thought she was maybe talking to a neighbor or helping someone cross the street. But then she came inside and waved at me. Big smile, like this was totally normal. Or someone's probably 4, maybe 5. I don't know, I'm bad at guessing kid ages. Anyway, they walked up to the table and I was like, oh, this is happening. She introduced him like she was introducing her dog or something. Just casually dropped his name, told me he loves chocolate muffins, and then slid into the seat across from me like this was all just part of the vibe. The kid climbed up onto the stool next to her, swinging his feet and immediately reaching for the sugar packets on the table. I hadn't even spoken yet. It was so jarring I kind of just smiled like an idiot and said, "Hey," and asked if they wanted anything. I went up and ordered a coffee for myself and a muffin for the kid because it felt rude not to. She didn't want anything, said she was cutting back on caffeine. We sat there for maybe 10 minutes making awkward small talk while her son kept interrupting with random questions like, "Do you like tigers?" And "Why have there holes in your shoes?" Which was a brutal call-out. By the way, they're Vans and they're supposed to be like that. Emily acted like this was completely normal. No apology, no heads up, nothing. Then, somewhere between her son accidentally spilling sugar all over the table and me trying to brush it off with a napkin, she suddenly stood up and said she had to run across the street for a quick thing. Didn't say what. Just said she'd be back in a bit. I looked up and kind of laughed, thinking she was joking. She wasn't. She told her son to be good, gave me a quick smile like she was tagging me in, and walked out the door like she was just grabbing napkins or something. Except she didn't come back. Not in 5 minutes, not in 10. She was gone for an hour. An actual hour. I sat there with a 4-year-old who kept asking me if I knew how to draw dinosaurs and why girls get to wear sparkly shoes and why the table was sticky. He was actually a cool kid. A little chaotic, but funny. Kept showing me stuff from her phone, She'd left it with him to play games, and I had to keep pretending I knew what was happening. The barista gave me a look at some point like, "Is this your kid?" And I just kind of nodded because I didn't want to explain. Meanwhile, I kept checking the door every 30 seconds thinking she'd walk back and holding a shopping bag or maybe looking embarrassed or maybe even laughing, saying she forgot something and had to grab it. But no, when she finally came back, she was holding a drink from another place down the block and a bag that clearly wasn't from the drugstore like I'd originally hoped. It was a boutique bag, like she'd been shopping for shoes or a top or whatever. She slid back into the booth like nothing happened and was like, "Thanks so much, you're amazing." He gets restless in stores. I didn't even know what to say. I just sort of nodded and smiled because I wasn't sure if I was allowed to be mad. I mean, it's not the kid's fault. He was cool. But still, she didn't even ask. Didn't even check if I was okay watching him or if I had somewhere to be, just dipped. She kept the conversation going like we were picking up mid-date. Asked me about my job, talked about some movie she saw the other week, acted like that hour hadn't happened. I answered a few things, mostly because her kid was listening and I didn't want to be cold, but I was already mentally checked out. After maybe 10 more minutes, I told her I had to head out. She thanked me again and said we should do it again sometime. Maybe just the two of us next time, with a laugh, like she was acknowledging it had been weird. I walked out and sat in my car for a while thinking about how strange that was. Like, what if I was some creep? She just left her kid with a guy she met online 2 days ago. No phone, no emergency contact, no check-in. Just dipped. I know I'm decent, but she didn't know that. I never messaged her again. She didn't message me either. I think she knew she'd crossed a line, or maybe she just figured she'd try again with someone else. Either way, I learned that no amount of good lighting in a profile pic is worth that kind of blind side. I should bail the second he said the word cookout, but I didn't because I'm too chill for my own good sometimes. Like I try to be that guy who just rolls with stuff. I'm not uptight or whatever, so when a girl says she wants to grab drinks instead of dinner, I'm like, cool. If someone wants to meet at a park instead of a coffee shop, I'd go with it. But Chris, man, he took the concept of non-traditional date and flipped it upside down, shook it, and set it on fire. So this was supposed to be our first time meeting. We'd been messaging for maybe 4 or 5 days. Nothing deep. Just back and forth about music, how much we both hated early morning alarms, what our go-to food orders were. I like that he wasn't super intense. No weird pet names, no over-the-top stuff. His photos were decent. A couple mirror selfies, a hiking one, and one with a dog that I assumed was his. He came off like a normal dude. That's really all I ask for now. Just someone who isn't trying to rope me into a pyramid scheme or tell me my birth chart within 5 minutes. So it's Saturday, and I'm getting ready when he texts me last minute and says, "Hey, would you be cool coming with me to this family thing instead? Just a barbecue, nothing big." I hesitate for like half a second. I probably should just said no, but I'd already shaved, already picked a shirt, and figured maybe it'd be low key. I imagined a backyard hangout with some cousins, maybe someone's birthday or whatever. He said it was casual. I was expecting a grill, some folding chairs, maybe a speaker in the corner playing old R/&B. I thought we'd chill, eat some food, and talk while dodging his tipsy uncle. Yeah, no, that is not what happened. He sent me the address and I pulled up to this massive house in the suburbs, like big yard, matching mailbox, a basketball hoop in the driveway type of place. There were like 30 cars parked out front. I almost kept driving, but I parked and walked up and texted him that I was there. He came outside to meet me, all smiles, wearing this button-up shirt and jeans like it was a whole event. I remember thinking, okay, maybe this is a little more formal than I thought, but whatever. It's already too late now. He walked me in and immediately his mom's at the door. I didn't even have time to say hi before she was hugging me and calling me sweetie. His aunt followed right after. Within 3 minutes of walking into that house, I had been hugged by 3 strangers, handed a plate of devoured eggs, and directed to the backyard like I was part of the family. And then Chris did the wildest thing I've ever had happen on a first date. He put his arm around me, turned to his cousin, and introduced me as his girlfriend. Not just that, he said I was his girlfriend of 3 years. I was mid-sip of lemonade and almost choked. 3 years? What are you talking about, bro? We haven't even shared a meal yet. And before I could react or correct him, he turned to the next person and said it again. I was standing there with a full plate of food, surrounded by folding chairs and people laughing and kids running around, and this dude had dropped me into a whole fictional relationship. And it gets worse. His ex was there. Apparently, she was invited because she's still friends with his cousin or something, I don't even know. But yeah, she was there sitting under a tent with some other people, and he made sure we walked past her like it was a movie scene. He held my hand, like actually grabbed it, and gave her this dramatic nod like he was proving a point. She looked up, looked at me, and then just smirked like she knew exactly what was going on. I felt like I was in the middle of a soap opera. After about 10 minutes of me quietly panicking, I pulled him aside and asked what was happening. Like, why did he say we were together for that long? And why didn't he tell me about any of this? And this man just shrugged, told me it was just easier, and that his family had been bugging him about moving on from his ex, and he thought it would be funny to bring a date and act like everything was good. That he didn't think I'd care. That it would be low pressure. Low pressure. I was fake dating a stranger in front of his entire extended family while trying to avoid eye contact with his ex who clearly wasn't buying any of it. And here's the thing, the food was actually amazing. Someone's grandma made mac and cheese that was baked to perfection. The ribs were next level. The sweet tea was so sweet it probably stopped my heart for half a second. But I couldn't enjoy any of it because I was stuck playing this weird role. Every time someone asked me a question about how we met or when we moved in together, I had to improvise. I read him a couple times just to pick up clues so I could keep the lies straight. It was like trying to guess the plot of a movie I walked in halfway through. I lasted maybe an hour. Then I told him I had a work thing and left. He actually had the nerve to ask if I wanted to come back later that night for s'mores. Like this was a weekend getaway or something. I said I'd think about it, got in my car, and just drove around for a bit blasting music trying to shake off the secondhand embarrassment. He texted the next day like nothing happened. Just asked if I had fun and said his family thought I was cool. I didn't respond. To this day, I still don't know what the plan was. Was he hoping I'd just play along the whole night? What if someone had asked about our anniversary or brought out a slideshow? I keep wondering how many people are out there now thinking on his long-term partner. Somewhere on a Facebook photo album, there's a picture of me awkwardly holding a paper plate of ribs with a stranger's arm around me and a caption like Chris and his girl. And that's how I ended up in a fake 3-year relationship with a guy I'd never even kissed. This date started off awkward before it even really began, mostly because I'd already decided I wasn't super into her before we met. I know how that sounds, but hear me out. Sometimes people just text in a way that doesn't match their vibe, and by the time you realize it, you've already agreed to dinner. That was Lauren. Her photos were pretty normal, nothing weird, and she'd messaged first, which I liked. Seemed confident. We only talked for a couple days, mostly her sending voice notes, and me kind of replying with short stuff because I didn't want to ghost, but I also didn't feel that spark. She picked a restaurant. Some trendy spot I'd never heard of with a name that sounded like it was trying too hard. Like one word, all lowercase, probably didn't even have real menus. I showed up on time, parked 2 blocks away because everything nearby was full, and walked up sweating through my shirt because of course it was one of those humid days where the air feels like soup. She was already standing out front. Tall, long braids, wearing a flowy dress and holding some kind of herbal tea in a mason jar. No joke. Like she brought her own drink to a restaurant. I thought that was just her pre-game tea or something, but it turned out she doesn't drink anything that isn't sourced with female energy. That should have been my first clue. We said hey, did the awkward one-arm hug thing, and walked in. The place was mostly empty, just 2 or 3 tables taken, which made it worse somehow. You know that silence where everyone can hear everything. That. The host greeted us, regular dude in a black shirt, clipboard, the usual, and asked if we wanted a booth or table. And that's when things got weird. Lauren just froze, looked the guy up and down, then looked at me like she was waiting for me to notice something. I didn't. I said booth was cool. But she didn't move. Just stood there and said, "Is our server gonna be male?" Like she was asking if they serve peanuts and she had an allergy. The host kind of blinked confused and said it depends, they rotate, but he could check. And Lauren goes, "I'd rather not be served by a man. I only support female-owned food." I swear I thought she was joking at first. Like maybe this was part of her weird sense of humor that I just hadn't gotten used to yet. But nope. Her face was completely serious. The host looked even more confused now. I was standing there half in the doorway, trying to decide if I should apologize or just back away slowly. She crossed her arms like she was about to make a speech and started saying something about how she doesn't trust men to prepare or handle food because of imbalance and how masculine energy makes digestion harder. And I swear I read that sentence 3 times in my head trying to figure out if I was hearing her right. At this point, the manager came over. Another guy, which only made it worse. He asked if everything was okay, and Lauren launched into a whole thing about how women should own food spaces and how we needed to walk out in solidarity. Not just her. We. Like, she wanted me to make a political stand with her against men working in restaurants. I don't even know. I looked at the manager and just kind of nodded like, sorry, man. I didn't know this was happening, and turned to Lauren to try and talk her down. Like, okay, maybe we could go somewhere else, maybe grab smoothies or whatever weird thing she'd be cool with. But she was already halfway out the door, waving at the staff like they'd personally offended her by existing. We stepped outside and I asked if she wanted to just go somewhere else, keep it chill, but she wasn't having it. She was on this mission now. Said she knew a spot down the street that only hired women and that they served intuitive cooking. I didn't even ask what that meant. I just followed her because I figured maybe this second place would be normal. Spoiler, it wasn't. This other spot was less a restaurant and more like someone's backyard with folding tables and a handwritten menu. I was pretty sure it was just a pop-up thing someone ran out of their live space. We sat on stools that wobbled every time you shifted your weight. Lauren immediately asked the woman running it if the ingredients were gathered with intention and if the food had aligned chakras. The woman, blessed her, just smiled and said the squash was organic, which seemed to satisfy Lauren. I ordered something safe, like a rice bowl. She got this beet and lentil thing that came with a side of moon water. No idea. Tasted like warm tap water with cucumber slices. Conversation was almost impossible. Every time I tried to steer it somewhere normal, movies, music, even dumb stuff like favorite cereal, she brought it back to some philosophy or story about this community she stayed at for a week in Oregon. I mentioned I liked burgers, and she went on a 10-minute tangent about cow trauma and dairy guilt. She asked if I'd ever felt the pain of an almond, and I honest to God thought I misheard her, but she doubled down and explained that almonds hold memory, and we're consuming that memory when we eat them. I was mostly just nodding and chewing at this point, trying to finish the meal and figure out how soon I could leave without being a jerk. The only relief came when her phone buzzed and she stepped away to take a call. I overheard just enough to know it was her roommate, and that they were arguing about who used whose sage bundle. When she came back, she asked if I wanted to go with her to this sound bath thing nearby. I said I had plans. She didn't ask what. The walk back to my car was quiet, and I think even she realized by then that it wasn't a match. She hugged me again, thanked me for honoring her space, and said she could feel I had potential. Not even kidding. Potential. I drove home in silence. No music, no podcast. Just me thinking about what I just sat through and whether I needed to start screening profiles for people who say divine feminine energy too many times. I don't even know how I end up in these situations, honestly. I don't think I'm doing anything that wild. Just using the apps like everyone else. Picking people who don't have blurry mirror pics or bios full of gym stats. I swipe on people who say something halfway normal and seem like they can hold a conversation. That's what I thought I was doing with Ben. His profile was short and dumb, but kind of funny. It said something like, I'll bring snacks if you bring sarcasm. I was like, all right, sure. He looked normal. Jeans, flannel, smile that didn't seem forced. I figured, worst case, we grab a drink. It's forgettable. So we planned to meet at this bar not far from me. One of those places that thinks Edison bulbs and rustic walls are enough to charge $14 for a cocktail. Whenever, I wasn't paying yet. I got there first, which I usually do because being late stresses me out, and grabbed a seat at the bar. It wasn't super packed. Just that middle of the week crowd where everyone looks like they're either trying to avoid going home or pretending they have somewhere better to be. Ben showed up maybe 5 minutes after me. He looked just like his photos, which is always a relief. A little taller than I expected, and he had this chill energy when he walked in, like he'd done this kind of thing 100 times. Not in a creepy way, just like it wasn't a big deal to him. We did the quick hey hug, sat down, ordered drinks. It started off totally fine. He made a joke about the menu having too many words. I said something about the lighting being dark enough to hide bad decisions, and it was kind of flowing. We talked about dumb stuff first. Music, what we were watching, how he once got banned from a trivia night for arguing with the host over a Marvel question. That part was funny. He was easy to talk to, not super intense. Not trying to impress me every 5 seconds. Just chill. I was honestly thinking it might turn into one of those dates that goes long and ends with a second bar or a late night taco truck. But then, and I'm not exaggerating, he said the wildest thing I've ever heard in the middle of a date. So we're like 40 minutes in. We've had maybe 1.5 drinks each. I'm talking about how people don't know how to shove during movies anymore, and he suddenly just pauses and goes, "Okay, I should probably tell you something." Now the way he said it wasn't even nervous. It wasn't that panicked kind of confession people give when they're about to admit they're still friends with their ex or have a weird pet. It was calm. Too calm. He looks at me dead serious and says, "I'm engaged, but I'm not sure it's gonna stick, so I'm kind of looking at other options just in case." I thought he was joking. I literally laughed because I thought this was some kind of sarcastic bit. He didn't laugh. He just sipped his drink and nodded like he'd just told me he was thinking of switching gyms. I sat there stunned, not even mad yet, just trying to figure out if I'd misheard him. So I asked him to say that again, and he repeated it. Word for word. "I'm engaged, but I don't know if she's the one, so I'm just seeing what's out there." I didn't even know how to respond. I was so thrown off I started laughing again, not because it was funny, but because I didn't know what else to do. And then he added, "I mean, you're in the top tier so far. You're chill, not too emotional." Like that was a compliment. So apparently, and I wish I was making this up, his engagement was a practical arrangement. They'd been together for a few years, their families were involved. There was pressure, and he figured it made sense. But now she'd been acting cold, and he wasn't sure she was still into it. So instead of, I don't know, talking to her about it like a normal person, he decided to get back on dating apps and start auditioning replacements. Auditioning. That's what it felt like he was doing interviews, and he was so casual about it. Said he wasn't hooking up with anyone, like that somehow made it better, but that he just wanted to find someone emotionally compatible in case things fell apart. I asked if his fiancée knew about any of this, and he literally said, "Not exactly," then shrugged. And here's the wildest part. He thought I'd be down. He went on to say he thought I got it, that I seemed like the type who understood how complicated relationships can be, and that I probably didn't believe in traditional stuff either. He said I had low maintenance energy, like that was a thing people should aspire to. At that point, I wasn't even angry. I was fascinated. Like watching someone crash a car in slow motion. I asked him what his plan was if I actually liked him back. What would he do then? And he said, "Then I have to make a tough decision, but at least I'd have options." I told him I wasn't trying to be someone's backup plan, and that if he was still engaged, he needed to sort his own life out before dragging other people into it. He didn't argue, just kind of nodded and said, "Yeah, I get that." Then asked if I wanted to finish our drinks or head out. I left. He texted me later that night, no apology, no explanation. Just, "You sure you're not open to something unconventional?" I blocked him. That's the first time I'd ever walked out on a date that wasn't even technically bad until it suddenly was. It wasn't the awkwardness or the vibe. It was the fact that he saw dating as some kind of insurance policy, like he was shopping around, looking at features, checking boxes, and he genuinely thought he was being honest and respectful by telling me about it early. Maybe he thought that counted for something. Engage, moored, and out here drafting backup wives on a Wednesday night. So yeah, I had a bunch of strange dates over the years, but this one had me genuinely sitting in my car afterward like, what just happened? And not even in the way where you laugh about it and move on. More like you feel like someone snuck into your life, poked around your closet, then sat across from you like it was no big deal. It all started pretty basic. I matched with this girl named Olivia on a Tuesday night. It was one of those swiping sessions where you're half watching TV and not expecting much. She popped up and had this kind of serious but pretty look, like the kind of girl who probably has a Goodreads account and rates books based on emotional depth. Her profile was kind of vague, just said she worked in strategy consulting and liked truth above all. I should have caught that red flag, but I was bored. She was cute, and her first message was actually something clever, not just hey. We messaged back and forth for a couple days. She was super quick to reply, which I liked, and she seemed really interested in everything I said. Like, not just polite nodding. She was asking deep questions. My childhood, my last relationship, even my relationship with my dad at one point. I thought maybe she was just a psychology nerd or something. It didn't feel flirty, but it felt intense in a way that was kind of addictive. She wasn't like anyone else I talked to on the apps. Everyone else was just, what's your favorite pizza topping? And she was digging into how I handle stress. We agreed to meet Friday at this bookstore cafe spot that has actual couches and mismatched furniture and smells like old paper and cinnamon. Kind of a weird spot for a first date, but I liked it better than another bar. Felt like maybe we could actually talk. She showed up 5 minutes early. I read it on her face immediately. She was confident. Like, not just knows how to dress confident. She walked in like she was about to lead a meeting. I stood up, said hey, gave her a quick hug. She smelled like lavender or maybe some kind of fancy shampoo. She was wearing a long coat even though it wasn't that cold out, and she took it off super slowly like she wanted to reveal some surprise underneath. Nothing wild, just a sweater and jeans. But the whole way she did it felt rehearsed. Anyway, we sit down, order drinks, and start talking. It was normal for maybe the first 15 minutes. She asked about my job. I asked about hers. She gave these vague answers like, I help organizations identify their blind spots, which sounds like something a spy would say, but okay. I told her I worked in marketing, nothing fancy, and she nodded like she already knew. That should have been my second clue. Then she leaned in, like physically leaned in, and said, so I hope you don't mind, but I did a little digging on you before we met. I kind of laughed and said, you mean like Googled me? Because yeah, I get it, people do that. It's 2025. Everyone checks Instagram or whatever. But she looked me dead in the eye and said, well, not just Googled. I also reached out to someone who said they used to date you. I just stared at her for a second, trying to figure out if I misheard. She took a sip of her drink like this was totally normal, and said she found my last ex on social media and messaged her to get a full picture of who I was. She actually used that phrase, full picture, like it was a true crime case. At first, I thought she was joking. I kept waiting for the punchline or for her to say she was just testing my reaction. But no, she meant it. She really tracked down my ex, sent her a message, and asked about me. And apparently my ex responded. Told her some stuff, nothing terrible, but apparently enough for Olivia to feel like she had context going into this date. I asked her why she would do that, not even angrily, just confused. Like, who does that? And she said, I like to go into things with closure already handled, whatever that means. Then she smiled like we were bonding over this. Like I should be impressed that she put in all this effort before we even shared a sandwich. She told me she likes to investigate patterns and said it helps her skip the part where people pretend to be someone they're not. I didn't even know how to respond to that. I asked her what my ex said, and she kind of waved it off like nothing major. Just enough. I was like, enough for what? To judge me? To pre-write your opinion? I was halfway through my coffee and just staring at her like she might start pulling out a file folder next. Then she asked me about a fight I had with my ex like 4 years ago. Something private that I barely remember, but apparently came up in whatever conversation they had. She brought it up casually, like she was asking about my favorite movie. That's when I realized I wasn't on a date. I was in some kind of weird interrogation where the other person already had the answers to the test. I told her straight up that it felt invasive and kind of weird. She didn't argue. She just nodded like she expected that reaction. Then she said, you're allowed to have your process. This is mine. I wanted to leave right then, but part of me was just fascinated. Like, I needed to see what else she was going to say. She started asking more questions, like whether I wanted kids, how I handled conflict if I'd ever been in therapy. And every time I answered, she just kind of nodded like she was updating some internal chart. After maybe another 20 minutes of that, I said I had to go. She smiled and said, I already kind of knew this wouldn't work, but it's nice to confirm it in person. Like she was the one deciding whether I passed or failed, like she already made the call before I even sat down. I walked out feeling like I'd just been part of a personality audit I didn't sign up for. I don't even know how she found my ex. Probably deep scrolled and matched some photos. Maybe she's just better at the internet than the FBI. She never texted again, and I obviously didn't reach out. I just kept thinking about what she said, about having closure before even starting. I don't know if that's efficient or just straight up unhinged. But yeah, that was Olivia, the girl who met me once but knew me better than I did. So this was back when I had a phase of saying yes to everyone just to get out of my apartment. I don't know what was going on with me during that time, but I had this weird mindset where I figured anything was better than staying in, ordering takeout, and rewatching old sitcoms. Like, I convinced myself that even a bad date was a better story than no date. That was the logic. And it's how I ended up on this wild meetup with a guy named Tony, who somehow made asking for a cosigner sound like he was pitching a joint business venture. I matched with him on a Thursday night, just lying on the couch bored out of my mind. His profile had this vibe like he was trying to be motivational, but not quite getting there. One pic of him flexing in a mirror, another of him standing next to a Dodge Charger with the hood up like that was supposed to impress someone. His bio said something like, CEO of my life, hustle over everything, and I should back out right there. But I don't know. Maybe I was bored, or maybe I just wanted to see if he'd be fun to mess with. Either way, we matched. He messaged first, just, let's vibe, which didn't mean anything, but I played along. I was half asleep and typed something back like, sure would. And he immediately suggested we grab food the next day. I figured, why not? It was a Friday, I didn't have plans, and worst case, I get a burger and never talk to him again. So we decided on this diner, one of those all-day breakfast spots with booths that squeak and menus that haven't been updated in 10 years. Not a bad choice. I got there right on time, and he was already sitting in a booth wearing sunglasses indoors. Not on his head, on his face. The guy looked like he thought paparazzi were gonna run up on him while he ordered pancakes. He stood up, gave me this side hug and called me queen, which threw me off because he said it with the tone of a guy who'd practiced it in a mirror. He sat down, flagged the waitress, and ordered a giant breakfast combo before I even opened the menu. Like he was a regular there or something. And he asked me what I wanted, and before I could answer, he told the waitress I'd have the same. I should have spoken up, but I didn't want to be difficult, and honestly, I was curious where this energy was going. The first 10 minutes were just him talking. Not even a conversation, just a TED talk about how hard he works, how people don't see the grind, how loyalty is rare now, how he's got big moves coming. I asked what he actually did for work, and he said, I do a lot, which again doesn't mean anything. I pressed him a bit, and he said he flips cars, invests in crypto, and runs a podcast on and off. When I asked what the podcast was about, he just said, mindset. I nodded along, trying to stay neutral, but my brain was already calculating when I could politely leave. Then he leaned back, took a long sip of his drink, and said something that made me pause. He goes, so, tell me, how do you feel about credit? I asked if he meant like the concept of it, or my credit score, and he said, both kinda. I'm big on long-term trust. If I vibe with someone and I see potential, I'm not scared to build something real, you know. And I'm sitting there nodding like, okay, he's trying to be deep. Maybe this is his version of talking about commitment. I said something basic like, yeah, I think trust is important. And then he hits me with it. Well, he says, this might sound wild, but would you ever co-sign something if the connection was right? At first I laughed. I really thought he was joking. Like, ha, imagine that. But his face stayed serious. He was fully locked in, waiting for my answer. I asked him what he meant, and he started laying out this whole plan like he'd been working on a pitch for a week. Said he was trying to get a new car, not just any car, but a statement vehicle, and his credit wasn't in the best place because of some drama with an ex and some mix-ups from CO ID. And he says he's got most of the money, just needs help with the paperwork. Called it a team play. And said, that's what power couples do. They invest in each other. I'd known this man for 30 minutes, maybe 35 if you count the time he spent talking about his custom license plate ideas. I sat there stunned. The waitress brought our food, and I honestly couldn't even eat because I was so thrown. I asked if he was serious, and he said, did ask like it was the most normal question in the world. Then he said he wouldn't ask just anyone, that I had energy he could trust, and that I seemed like I get it. I tried to laugh it off and said I wasn't really in the market for car loans with strangers, and he waved his hand like I was overthinking it. Said he wasn't asking me to sign today, just wanted to put it in the air, manifest it. After that, everything got weirdly quiet, like he could tell I wasn't buying it. He pulled out his phone, showed me a picture of the car he wanted, talked about how he already put down a deposit, and how the guy at the dealership said co-signers were common now. I kept nodding, but I was mentally gone. I ate one bite of toast and started thinking of fake reasons to leave. He started talking again, this time about loyalty and how women these days don't know how to build with a man. I told him I didn't really know him, and he said, "That's what dating is for. Seeing who's real." I told him what I was seeing, and he didn't like that answer. I paid for my own food, stood up, and told him I had to go meet a friend. He didn't walk me out. Just said, "Let him know if you change your mind." Like I was gonna go home, sleep on it, and decide I wanted to commit to someone else's car note. I never replied to his follow-up texts, but I saw one where he said, "You missed out on building an empire." I blocked the number. You know how sometimes you're out with someone halfway through you realize, oh no, this person definitely grows their own toothpaste. That was Amanda. The whole thing started because my coworker begged me to try this new app he was on. Said it had a better algorithm and more thoughtful people than the usual stuff. Which, whatever, I didn't buy into the hype. But I was tired of swiping through people with dead eyes and Instagram captions in their bios. So I downloaded it. And yeah, people on there were definitely different. Amanda was one of the first people I matched with. She had this big, messy hair that looked cool in a didn't even try kind of way. Her profile said she lived in a converted bus. I thought she was joking. She listed her interests as barefoot gardening, natural scents, and body autonomy, and her pics were mostly her in open fields holding crystals or sitting on rocks in long skirts. It wasn't totally my thing, but something about it was interesting. Like, she seemed offbeat but confident. I figured at the very least, it'd be an interesting conversation. We messaged for a couple days. She didn't use punctuation, which made it weird to read, but she had a laid-back vibe. Asked me about my dreams, whether I ever fasted for spiritual clarity, and if I had ever felt at war with donor. Again, I thought that part was a joke. I made some dumb comment back about Old Spice trauma, and she sent back a voice note laughing. So we made plans to meet for dinner. I suggested a regular restaurant, and she said she preferred places with elemental balance. I didn't even know what that meant. Eventually, she agreed to this vegetarian cafe downtown that had lots of plants and candles and stuff. Looked peaceful enough. She got there before me and was sitting on the floor, not in a seat. On the floor by the front window with her shoes off, legs crossed like she was in the middle of a yoga retreat. I walked in and saw her just chilling there like it was the most normal thing in the world. I kind of froze and asked if she wanted to grab a table, and she said, "I'm grounding myself right now." I looked at the host, who looked back at me like, "Dude, your problem," and I just nodded and tried to roll with it. She stood up a minute later and didn't put her shoes back on. Just walked to the table barefoot like she was walking around her living room. Everyone in the place noticed, but she didn't care. She sat down and immediately asked if I felt tense in my core. I said I felt pretty normal. She reached across the table, put 2 fingers on my wrist, and said my energy was swollen. I didn't know what to do with that, so I just said, "Cool." Then came the menu situation. She opened it, looked around the room, and goes, "I actually don't eat anywhere that cooks with soap." At first, I thought she meant like dish soap. I was confused. I asked her to explain, and she launched into this whole thing about how soap is full of chemicals, and chemicals interrupt the body's natural bacteria. She said the kitchen smelled too sterile, and she didn't trust places that wash their hands after every task because that's just for your culture. I was literally sitting there mid-sip of my drink, trying to act chill, while mentally Googling, can someone smell soap residue in a restaurant? She waved the waiter over and asked if they used soap on their dishes. He was clearly caught off guard. Just blinked and said yes, of course. She sighed loudly and said, "That's unfortunate," and handed the menu back. Said she wouldn't be eating, but she'd stay to exchange frequency. I ordered something anyway because I was starving and figured I needed a reason to survive the next 45 minutes. When my food came, she looked at it like I had just brought out a tray of poison. Asked me how often I cleanse. I thought she meant diet cleanse, but she was talking about using water without additives. She said even filtered water was lying to your cells. I read that back in my head 3 times and still don't know what she meant. And I haven't even gotten to the hygiene part yet. About halfway through the conversation, she goes, "Can I ask you something personal?" I said, "Sure." She asked if I use commercial hygiene products, not like general stuff. She meant any products. I told her, yeah, I use soap, shampoo, deodorant, pretty standard stuff. She frowned, like real disappointment. She said she hadn't used any products in over 2 years, not even toothpaste. She said your body learns to rebalance itself when you stop interfering. I asked what she did instead, and she said, "I trust my body's scent." Her exact words. She said smells were part of our truth, and the reason modern people were disconnected from their intuition is because we were washing off our instincts. I was chewing a piece of tofu while she told me this. I genuinely considered whether I could fake an emergency. My brain was scrambling for exit strategies while she kept talking about how soap causes emotional repression. I was just trying not to breathe in too deeply at that point. Also, the barefoot thing never stopped. She even got up at one point to go to the restroom and walked across the restaurant barefoot, humming to herself. The staff didn't say anything, but every person in that place turned to look. She waved at a little kid on the way back and said something about walking the earth like our ancestors. The kid looked terrified. She came back to the table and said she could tell the energy was off in the bathroom. Said she wouldn't go in there again and asked if I could walk her to the park after. I told her I had early work the next day, complete lie, and she nodded like she saw it coming. She said she enjoyed our time, even if I was still asleep. As we walked out, she said she hoped I'd reconsider soap one day and that she felt a flicker of connection, even through the chemicals. She didn't ask for my number, just gave me a long, floaty hug and walked off barefoot into the street like she was headed to a drum circle. I got home and took a long shower with every product I own. This all happened because my friend was trying to play matchmaker during her healing era, or whatever she was calling it. She was deep into this whole thing where she believed the universe wanted her to facilitate connections, so she kept trying to set me up with people she barely knew. I wasn't even mad at first. I figured, okay, maybe the apps suck right now and she's got better instincts than the algorithm. Spoiler, she doesn't. Anyway, she sends me this guy's info and says his name is Zed. Just Zed, like Prince or Cher or some other one-name person who thinks that's a personality. She said she met him at this barbecue her cousin threw and that he was low-key, but cool and kind of hot in a rugged way. I asked if he had a job. She said she thought so. I should have stopped there. Zed texted me later that day, and to be honest, his first message was kind of funny. He said something about how he hoped I liked loud music, soft hoodies, and strong opinions, which sounded like a dating profile from 2014, but at least it wasn't what you doing. We messaged for a few days. He wasn't a great texter, but he seemed funny enough and used real punctuation, which already put him ahead of half the dudes I'd met lately. We made plans to get drinks at this dive bar near my neighborhood, the kind with sticky floors and one pool table and a jukebox that only works half the time. I didn't mind. Sometimes low-effort places are where people let their guard down. He got there before me and was standing outside smoking. He wasn't what I expected exactly. He looked like someone who just got off work at a motorcycle shop, but wasn't actually into bikes. Scruffy beard, hoodie that had seen better days, boots. He smiled when he saw me, put out his cigarette, and said something about the weather being good for once, like we'd already been talking about it. We went inside and grabbed a booth. Ordered drinks. I got something boring, he got whiskey. Straight, which felt like a red flag, but I let it slide. At first, the convo was decent. He was cracking jokes, kind of self-deprecating, and didn't take himself too seriously. Told me about how he tried to start a hot sauce brand during lockdown and accidentally made one that burned his friend's mouth so bad he had to go to urgent care. Stuff like that. Dumb, but entertaining. Then, somewhere between his second drink and me finishing my fries, he said, "So, full disclosure, I've had a couple kids. Now, I'm not the type to freak out about that. I know people have lives and pasts." I asked how old they were, and he said 5 and 8. I said, okay, cool, and asked if he saw them a lot. And this man smiled like he was proud, and said, "Not really. Their moms got them most of the time, and I don't really do the whole child support thing. That's a scam anyway." I stared at him like he just told me he eats batteries for fun. He kept talking. Said the court system is rigged. He's not about to hand over money for someone else to waste, and that kids need a little struggle to build character. He said he checks in with them when it makes sense, but he's not trying to be one of those dads who lives for their kids. Like, that's a bad thing. At this point, I'm just frozen, drink in hand, trying to figure out if I should leave or if he's going to say something even worse. He did. He leaned in real casual and said, "You seem chill, though. Are you into, like, minimalist parenting? I'm all about bare minimum dads. Less pressure, more freedom. You get it?" I laughed, not because it was funny. More like my brain short-circuited and I didn't know what to do with that sentence. Bare minimum dads should not be a term that exists, let alone one someone uses to describe themselves with pride. He doubled down too. Said women always expect too much. Like if a guy changes one diaper, he wants a parade. I asked him if he ever changed a diaper. He said, probably. Probably. Then he told me about his latest idea. Some app he wants to develop that matches single dads with women who don't need help but want company. Like Uber for emotional co-pilots. I wish I was joking. He actually said that. Uber for emotional co-pilots. Said the women on there wouldn't expect him to do dad stuff. They just chill, vibe, and occasionally watch cartoons with his kids. He thought it was genius. I asked him what he does for work now, and he said he's between things, but working on some side hustles. I asked what kind of side hustles. He said reselling sneakers and possibly flipping furniture if he can find a truck. So basically nothing. I started making up excuses in my head. I needed to leave, but I couldn't think of a way that didn't sound obvious. Then he made it easy for me. He said, I feel like we got something here. You're not like uptight or judgy like some other women I've met. You got that chill energy. I could see us doing the blended family thing, with boundaries, of course. I told him I had to get up early and that I should go. He offered to walk me to my car. I said no, I was good. He asked for a hug. I gave him a half-shoulder thing and dipped. He texted me later that night, still thinking about that bare minimum convo. You'd be an amazing stepmom, Ta. I didn't reply. I told my friend what happened, and she was like, oh my God, I forgot he had kids. Like she just left that part out. I told her next time she wants to facilitate a connection, she can facilitate it with someone else. This story starts in the middle of my most unlucky streak with dating. I was like 5 bad dates deep into what I now call the what the hell is going on phase. I kept matching with people who seemed totally normal on the app, then would show up in person and act like we were already mid-relationship or in the middle of a breakup. It was chaos. I even joked to my roommate that I should start going on dates with a referee present just to keep things from spiraling. Funny how that ended up actually happening, sort of. So, I matched with Hannah on a Sunday night. I was half watching a dumb documentary about conspiracy theories and swiping out of boredom. Her profile was clean, well-lit pics, nothing weird. She had this one where she was holding a coffee cup and smiling like someone just told her a secret that made her whole week. Something about it felt really approachable. Her bio said she loved honest communication, deep questions, and radical self-awareness. That should have been a flag, but I was like, okay, maybe she's just emotionally mature. I can work with that. She messaged first and asked me something about what I'm working on healing lately. That threw me a little, but I was like, all right, let's see where this goes. I told her I was trying to be less passive and speak up more, which is true. She was really responsive, sent long messages, but not in a love-bombing way, just thoughtful. Asked about my last relationship, told me she appreciated my openness, said she was doing a lot of work on herself, and that dating can be an intentional process if we choose it to be. I didn't get any bad vibes from her. A little intense, sure, but not unhinged. So we planned a date for Thursday evening. Coffee shop, nothing major. I picked this little place I like because it's low-key, has enough background noise to make awkward silences feel less painful. Plus, there's parking, which is gold where I live. I got there first, grabbed a spot by the window, ordered a drink. 10 minutes go by and I see her walk in, tall, scarf, big tote bag. She waves and smiles and turns back toward the door and waves someone else in. I assumed it was maybe a friend she ran into or something. But nope, it was a guy. Dressed business casual, glasses, holding a tablet. He looked like someone's youth pastor or maybe a startup consultant. He walked in behind her, nodded at me like he knew me, and sat down with her at the table. I'm just sitting there like, what is happening? I thought maybe they were finishing something up and she'd ask him to leave. But no, she introduced me to him right away and said, this is Charles. He's my therapist. I laughed. Because come on, that has to be a joke, right? Who brings their therapist to a first date? But she was totally serious. Said she'd been working through some patterns and thought it would be really helpful to have Charles present as a neutral third party. I looked at Charles and he just kind of smiled like this was completely normal. I asked if this was part of some coaching thing or if this was actually therapy. He said, technically I'm off the clock, but I'm here in a supportive capacity. I didn't even know what to say to that. So we sit there, and instead of, getting to know each other like two adults, she launches into this whole thing about her previous relationships. Talked about what went wrong, how she tends to attract avoidant types, and how she's been working on being more direct. Meanwhile, Charles is just sitting there nodding, occasionally chiming in with stuff like, yes, we've done a lot of progress on that. I didn't even know if I should talk to her or to him or what. Then she looks at me and says, so tell me about your attachment style. I'm not even exaggerating. I was halfway through a sip of tea when she dropped that. I asked her if she was being serious, and she said yes. Charles backed her up and said it would really help her connect if she understood my emotional blueprint. I tried to answer it lightly, said I probably lean anxious sometimes, but I'm self-aware about it. She looked at Charles and he nodded again like I just passed a test. The whole thing started feeling like a panel interview. I'd say something, she'd reflect on it, and then Charles would give it a light therapist stamp. I couldn't figure out what my role was supposed to be. Was I dating her or applying to be part of her emotional curriculum? At one point, I tried to steer the convo towards something simple, movies, music, travel, and she said, let's stay with the real stuff for now. And she asked if I'd be willing to do a vulnerability exercise. I thought she meant like, say something honest. No, she pulled out a stack of cards from her bag labeled emotional depth prompts. She shuffled them, handed me one, and told me to read it aloud. I read it. It said, describe a time you felt invisible and how that shaped your sense of worth. I blinked, looked at her, looked at Charles. He gave me the go-ahead nod like we were in a workshop. I put the card down and said, I'm not really comfortable doing therapy in public. She looked disappointed, like I was blocking my growth. I said I thought we were getting coffee, not doing a breakthrough session. She said, this is how I date now. I told her that was fine, but I wasn't down to have a third person at the table evaluating my emotional wounds over lats. She didn't get mad, just said, I honor your boundaries and thanked me for being honest. Charles said it was brave of me to walk away. I don't know if that was supposed to make me feel better or worse. I left, walked to my car, sat there for a bit just processing what the hell had just happened. A part of me kind of admired her commitment to the bit, like she really meant it. But also, it was a date, a first one. Who brings their therapist? Who thinks that's casual? She texted me later and said she hoped I'd find what I was looking for, and that she hoped I'd reflect on the ways I deflect intimacy. I didn't reply. So that was Hannah, the first, and hopefully last person who made me say the words, I don't think your therapist should be here. I wasn't even supposed to be on that app anymore. That's the worst part. I had deleted it, like fully deleted it from my phone, not just logged out. But I re-downloaded it during a weird week when my roommates were all out of town. I was stuck in the apartment with nothing but leftovers, laundry, and my own dumb thoughts. So I got back on for what I told myself would just be one weekend. Just to see. Just to mess around. That's when I matched with Mike. Mike had one of those profiles that gave off harmless uncle energy. Not in a creepy way. Just like, safe. You know the type. Button-up shirt in every pic, a dog, maybe a beer in hand at some barbecue where everyone's wearing sandals. His bio was short. Something like, looking for something real, not here to play games. Which, looking back, is actually hilarious considering what happened. But at the time, I thought it was straightforward. He looked clean, a little older than me, probably late 30s, but not too old to feel weird. Mature, I figured, grown. We started chatting. Nothing crazy. He messaged first, and it wasn't cringe or overly flirty. Just a, hey, how's your week going? And I replied because I wasn't doing anything better, and it was either that or keep folding laundry. He was quick with responses but didn't bombard me, and we had that kind of easy back and forth that makes you think, okay, maybe this one won't be a disaster. He suggested meeting up for drinks at this rooftop bar in the middle of the city. I knew the place. Moody enough to feel like a real date, but not so fancy that I'd have to pretend I understood why. We picked a Wednesday night, middle of the week, lower pressure. I showed up about 10 minutes early, grabbed a table near the edge so we could look out of the skyline, and ordered a soda just to have something in front of me. I figured I'd keep it chill in case things went south quickly. When he arrived, I could already tell he was shorter than I thought, but that wasn't a deal breaker. What threw me more was how he carried himself. Not nervous, not cocky. Just like he was walking into a meeting he already prepared for. It wasn't confidence. It was control. He hugged me, said I looked even better in person. Standard stuff. And then sat down across from me and took off his jacket with this weird kind of care, like he wanted to make sure everything was laid out just right. First few minutes of conversation were normal. He asked about my job, I asked about his. He said he worked in tech consulting, whatever that means. Talked about traveling for work, how he was barely home, how the city was just a place to sleep half the time. I asked if he lived close by, and he said, not far, but didn't give details. Kind of vague, but I wasn't trying to press. Not yet. Then came the part where I should have picked up on something. He asked me how I felt about non-traditional relationships. Just casually dropped that in between talking about where I grew up and whether I liked spicy food. I kind of laughed it off and said, what does that mean to you? And he just shrugged and said, people get too hung up on rules. I assumed maybe he meant open relationships or dating casually, so I just said I wasn't looking to be anyone's side project and moved on. We ordered drinks. He got whiskey, I got something fruity and probably too sweet. The combo picked up again. Music, movies, a random debate about whether cheesecake counts as cake or pie. All harmless. I started to feel more relaxed, like, okay, this is actually kind of fun. He was funny, kind of sarcastic, but not mean. He didn't interrupt. He actually listened. I even found myself leaning in during parts of the conversation, which I rarely do on a first date. Then right after the second round of drinks came, he hit me with it. No warning, no build-up, just dropped out of a casual fact. I should probably tell you I'm married, he said, then took a sip of his drink like he'd just told me he drives a press. I just stared at him, like maybe I misheard or missed a word. He didn't flinch, just looked at me like he was waiting for my reaction. I asked him, straight up, if I was on a date with a married man right now. And he said, yes, but it's not what it sounds like. That's when they always say that. It's not what it sounds like. I asked if his wife knew he was on dates with people. He said no, but then added that it wasn't emotional cheating because they were basically roommates with a marriage license and hadn't been close in a long time. I asked him why he didn't just get divorced. He said divorce was messy, expensive, and complicated. But what he was looking for, and I quote, was just something physical with someone cool. I asked him why he didn't just go on one of those hookup apps, and he said they were too impersonal. Said he liked talking to people, forming connections, but keeping it light. Said he wasn't trying to fall in love or anything, just wanted someone who got it. Someone mature enough to keep it in a separate box. He literally used the phrase a separate box. I told him I didn't do boxes. That if he wanted to cheat, he could go do it with someone who didn't ask questions. He said he wasn't cheating. He was being transparent. That line pissed me off more than anything. Like the fact that he told me made it noble. Like honesty gives you permission to be trash. He didn't get mad. Just nodded and said, I respect your boundaries, which felt like such a fake therapy term in that moment. Then he finished his drink and sat there like he expected me to change my mind. I didn't. I got up, told him I hoped his wife figured it out before he got caught, and left. On the way down the stairs, I texted my roommate, never dating again, which was dramatic, but I meant it in the moment. He texted me the next morning. Said he respected my decision, but he thought we had a vibe. I didn't answer. I didn't block him either. I just left it there, unread, like his marriage. So, yeah, Mike, married guy looking for something physical in a separate box. Hope that box comes with a lock. I never used to believe in weird energy stuff, like when people say you can sense something's off before it happens. But now, after this date, I'm 100% convinced the air was trying to warn me. Like the way your playlist shuffles just the wrong way or your shoes start squeaking out of nowhere when you're walking into the restaurant. All these tiny little signs telling you to turn around. But I didn't. I ignored them like a dumb character in a horror movie. It was a Saturday night. I was in a good mood for once. Had finished all my laundry, shaved, actually put effort in my outfit. I wasn't even nervous. I'd matched with Ashley a few days before, and she came off totally normal. Cute pics, some inside jokey captions, and a bio that said she loved horror movies and sour candy. Nothing weird. No mention of crystals, emotional detoxes, or rising signs. We'd messaged a bunch, and she seemed funny, kind of sarcastic in a good way. She didn't give off the weird energy. Yet. We planned to meet at this sushi place I've been wanting to try. Not too fancy, not too casual. The kind of spot where it's acceptable to eat with your hands, but still looks cool on Instagram. I got there first, which is normal for me because I have some weird need to always be early. I grabbed a booth in the corner and started checking the menu, half texting my friend updates like, she better not order California rolls and call it sushi. Ashley walked in about 5 minutes later, wearing a black leather jacket and jeans, super casual. She looked good, same as her pics, which always feels like a win now. She smiled when she saw me, but there was something in her face that I couldn't place. I had to pause before she reacted. I figured maybe she just wasn't sure it was me right away, or she was trying to figure out where to sit. Whatever. She slid into the booth across from me, and we did the usual awkward small talk. How was your day? Did you find the place okay? What do you usually order here? I was doing my usual light banter thing, trying to keep it funny without being annoying. She wasn't really giving me much. Just small smiles, some nodding, and kind of a faraway look every time I said something. I thought maybe she was shy. I've had that before. Someone just needs time to warm up. But after like 10 minutes, she still wasn't fully there. Like her eyes were looking at me but not focusing. Her energy felt like she was halfway in a different room. Then the waitress came over, asked if we wanted drinks. I ordered a beer. Ashley said water. I didn't think much of it, figured maybe she doesn't drink. But as soon as the waitress walked away, she let out this sigh that was way heavier than the situation called for. She looked at me, paused again, and then said, sorry, you just really remind me of someone. I kind of laughed like, oh yeah, ex-boyfriend, just trying to keep it light. She didn't laugh. She nodded slowly and said, yeah, him. I was about to ask what that meant when her whole expression just changed. Her eyes welled up, like instantly. No warning. 1 second she's sitting there sipping water, and the next tears are in her eyes, and her mouth is all tense like she's holding back some emotional avalanche. I froze. I wasn't sure if I should say something or just pretend I didn't see it. But she wiped her face, took a breath, and then fully started crying. Not sobbing, but definitely crying. Like real tears rolling down her cheeks while she whispered something about how unfair it is. I was stuck. Completely stunned. I'd never had someone cry during a first date, let alone 5 minutes into it. She started saying stuff like, you don't understand, he really broke me. And it's just so jarring seeing your face. And the whole time I'm sitting there like, I just wanted some sushi. I don't even know this man she's talking about, but apparently I look like his identical twin, and that's enough to wreck her night. The waitress came back with our drinks, saw her crying, and looked at me like I was the villain. I tried to give her the I have no idea what's happening look, but I don't think it worked. She backed away real fast. Probably told the other servers I was some jerk who brought his girlfriend to tears at a sushi place. I asked Ashley if she wanted to go, like maybe walk it off or call someone, but she shook her head and said she wanted to stay. She kept saying, I thought I was ready. I thought I was past it, like this was some test she was giving herself, like she purposely gone on this date with a guy who looked like her ex just to see if she could handle it, and apparently she could not. She told me all about him, the ex. His name was Darren or Daryl or something with a D. Said he cheated on her with someone she worked with. Said he gaslit her for a year and ruined her self-worth. Said he disappeared and then came back 3 months later like nothing had happened. And apparently I had his exact eyebrows and voice. I kept trying to pivot. Asked if she wanted to just be friends, lighten the mood, maybe just hang out and talk about literally anything else. She said no, she needed to feel it. She actually said that. I need to feel this pain so I can let it go. And I was just sitting there like, girl, I'm not your exorcism. She pulled out her phone at one point and showed me a photo of him. And I'll admit it, he looked a little like me. Same haircut, similar build. But still, I don't cry every time I see someone who looks like a person who cut me off in traffic. There's a limit. We never even ordered food. The waitress came back twice and I had to keep saying we needed a few more minutes. Eventually, I just asked for the check for the drinks, paid, and walked her outside. She said thank you, said I was kind and patient, then gave me a hug that was more like an apology than a goodbye. I never heard from her again. No follow-up text, no sorry about that, nothing. I think she just needed to project her trauma onto a random dude for a night, and I happened to fit the part. I swear I didn't even want to go on this date. That's the honest truth. I wasn't in the mood, I hadn't slept well, and I had a long day full of people being annoying for no reason. The only reason I even followed through was because I'd already postponed once, and I felt kind of that. Plus, my friend wouldn't stop hyping the guy up. She kept saying, no, seriously, Edward's the kind of guy who's got his life together. Like grown man energy. Which, to be fair, was technically true. But she forgot to mention he took that together energy and turned it into something straight out of a parody sketch. I met Edward through one of those mutual connections setups where your friend swears they found someone who's perfect for you, but the truth is they just know two people who are single and hope it works. We exchanged numbers, texted for a bit, nothing major, just standard small talk, and agreed to meet at this brunch place he picked. Not a bad spot. Kind of classy without being pretentious. It's one of those places where they give you 8 kinds of toast and call it a tasting board. He texted me earlier that day confirming everything, even included the reservation name and time, which I actually appreciated because that never happens. Most guys are like, you still down? 30 minutes before and then act surprised when you don't show. So I got there about 5 minutes late, walked in, and immediately spotted him. Button-down shirt, clean shave, sitting up straight like he was waiting for a meeting with a client. He waved me over, stood up, pulled out my chair, all the gentleman stuff. I won't lie, it was a nice change from the usual half-assed first date vibe, where the guy doesn't even look up from his phone when you walk in. He started the convo with a compliment. Said I looked exactly like my photos, but better, which made me smile because at least I knew he wasn't here to waste time. We ordered coffee, and he asked if I wanted to try the house-made jam flight. I laughed and said sure, because honestly, how often do you get a jam flight? Then, right as the waitress walked away, he said, "So I prepared a little something. Hope you don't mind," and pulled out, I kid you not, a resume. A real one, folded into thirds like a cover letter printed on thick paper. He slid it across the table like we were in a hiring process. I thought it was a joke at first. I literally laughed and said, "Wait, seriously?" But he just nodded and said, "I believe in transparency, and I figured it'd save us time." I looked down at it, and sure enough, it had bullet points. A full-on list of relationship qualifications. The top section said, personal overview. Emotionally available. Steady income. Good communicator. Enjoys family events. Actively in therapy. Underneath that was a section called relationship history, where he listed 3 women by first name and the years they dated. It even had reasons for the breakups next to each one. Rachel, 2015 to 2017. Grew apart. Dana, 2017 to 2020. Trust issues. Mutual. Lila, 2021 to 2022. Timing didn't align. I read it out loud and he nodded like he was proud of his formatting. I asked him if the women knew he was putting them on a first date handout, and he said no, but he didn't think they'd mind because he kept it respectful. Then he flipped the page over and said, "That's where I break down strengths and weaknesses." I was speechless. I wasn't sure if I should laugh or take notes or just run. The strengths list included things like punctuality, financial literacy, and empathy, currently improving. His weaknesses can be overly analytical, struggles with spontaneity, and tends to over-communicate in conflict. He even had a pie chart, a real pie chart, of how he divides his time during the week: work, hobbies, socializing, personal growth, sleep. I looked up and asked him if this was a thing he did often. He said no, just on first dates where he sees potential, which made it worse somehow. Like, he'd scope me out, decide I was worth the paperwork, and still didn't think maybe this was a bit much. He told me he used to work in HR and believed in setting clear expectations early. Said he didn't want to waste time or play games. I said I appreciated the effort, but most people just ask what your favorite color is or what shows you're watching. He smiled and said, "That comes later, after compatibility is established." At this point, I wasn't even mad. I was fascinated. It was like he built an entire dating system based on corporate structure. I asked him if there was going to be a performance review, and he said, "Only if we get to quarter 2. He tried to keep the conversation going like it was totally normal. Asked me what my long-term goals were. Asked if I believed in 5-year plans. Asked how I handle failure. And to be fair, I did answer. I got caught up in it a little. There's something about the way he talked that made you want to play along, even if it was insane. We finished brunch. The jam flight was actually fire, not even gonna lie. And when the bill came, he pulled out a spreadsheet. I nearly lost it. He showed me a dating expense tracker and asked if I'd be okay splitting it, since first meetings are mutual investments. I agreed, mostly because I was scared he'd send me a Venmo request later anyway. We walked out, and he offered a handshake. A handshake. Not a hug. Nah, let's do this again. Just a firm, professional grip and a thank you for your time type of energy. I asked him if he was planning to follow up, and he said, yes, you'll hear from me within 48 hours. He did text me, exactly 47 hours later. A whole message with feedback, including what he liked, my sense of humor, my openness, and what he thought could be a growth area. He said I was slightly evasive when asked about future planning. I stared at my phone for a full minute before deleting the thread. This one starts with me sitting in my car outside of a gas station, red from the sun, half mad at myself for saying yes to this date in the first place. Like I already knew I shouldn't have been talking to this girl. Everything in my gut was telling me not to. But I'd been single too long, hadn't had a decent conversation in weeks, and every other match I got was just bots or weird spam accounts asking me to verify myself on their link. So when Flo messaged me first, I paid attention. Her profile was kind of extra but not terrible. It looked like she had a ring light surgically attached to her body. Every photo was glowing, full face of makeup, captions about protecting her time, and only vibing with people who match her frequency. I should have scrolled past. But again, I was bored, it was hot out, and I hadn't had human interaction that wasn't a cashier in like 3 days. She sent the first message, something short like, hey, you look chill, which is a weird compliment, but whatever. I replied, we started talking, and right away I noticed she was intense. Not rude, not even cold, just very direct. Every response was like a TED Talk. She asked if I had a stable income within the first hour. Asked how I felt about marriage and if I had any unresolved trauma. I was like, are we dating or filling out a tax form? But I stuck with it. She was cute. I figured maybe she was just the type who likes to cut through the fluff. We made plans to grab dinner. Nothing fancy, just this taco spot that's open late and plays good music. I told her the time, the place, everything. She said cool. Then about an hour later, she sends me this long paragraph that starts off with, so before we meet, I just need to protect my time and energy, which already had me bracing for something wild. She followed it up with, I ask all potential dates to Venmo me $50 beforehand. This isn't a fee, it's a gesture of seriousness. I thought it was a prank, like she was messing with me to see how I'd react. So I laughed and sent back, wait, what? And she replied with a screenshot of her Venmo profile and it said, just let me know once it's sent and I'll lock in the time. I read it again, thought maybe I missed something. No, she was literally asking for $50 before we even met. And not as a split the check in advance thing, but as a test. She called it pre-commitment courtesy. Said it filters out the time wasters. At this point, I was already out running errands and trying to decide if I should just block her or call her out. I didn't do either right away. I asked if this was something she asked every guy, and she said yes. Said men don't value women's time, and this is how she sets the tone. I asked what happens if we meet and don't vibe. Do I get a refund? She said no, because she showed up with intention, and that's the value she offers. I sat there in my car thinking about it way longer than I should have. Not because I was actually considering it, but because I was fascinated. I had never in my life had someone ask me to send money just to confirm a date. I get people asking for reassurance. I get people being cautious, but this was a whole new level. I told her straight out that I wasn't comfortable sending money to someone I hadn't met, and she hit me back with, totally fine, just know that's how we got low effort guys. I told her I wasn't low effort, I was just not stupid. She left me on read after that. A day later, she messaged again and said, if you change your mind, the offer still stands. Like it was some kind of business proposal. I told her I'd pass. Here's where it gets even weirder. I started thinking maybe I was overreacting. Maybe this is some new dating trend I hadn't heard about, so I asked a couple friends what they thought. One dude said he actually had someone do the same thing to him, except she asked for $30 just to make sure he wasn't wasting her makeup. Another guy said he once paid $20 just because he thought she might actually be cool if she didn't show up. So apparently this is a thing now. Out of curiosity, I checked Clue's socials. She had them linked on her profile. Her bio literally said, no money, no meeting. Your energy is an investment. She had stories of her getting dressed for dates and tagging guys with thank you messages for pre-date support. One post said, another king who respects my time, he becoming. I couldn't believe how many dudes were just paying her to consider spending time with them. She wasn't scamming exactly. She was just marketing her presence like a product, and people were buying it. I didn't respond again. She unfollowed me 2 days later. I never saw her in person, never even heard her voice. The thing is, I don't even care about the money part. I spent more than $50 on way worse nights. It's the vibe of it, the way she framed it. Like just by being a woman who showed up, she was owed something before anything even started. Like dating was a transaction and I needed to pay admission just to prove I was serious. I'm not anti-boundaries, but if your entire standard is prove your value through cash first, then you're not dating, you're hiring. All right, I'll admit it, I kind of walked into this one with my guard down because I thought I'd finally picked a normal one. After the last couple of dates where dudes were either emotionally spiraling or asking me to co-sign loans, Josh seemed like a refreshing palate cleanser. His profile had no shirtless mirror selfies, no weird zodiac stuff, no alpha male energy. Just a few travel pics, one of him holding a coffee next to some huge dog, and a bio that said, building things, staying curious, and looking for someone with a sharp mind and a soft spot for sarcasm. That last part got me. I don't know why. Maybe it was a sarcasm line, or maybe I just needed a win that week. I was in the mood for something low effort and maybe even mildly interesting, and he didn't seem like a disaster. Just a guy in tech, probably a little bit of a nerd, but I figured, hey, at least that usually means they're polite and show up on time. We decided to meet for drinks at this rooftop bar neither of us had been to. He dictated and sent me a screenshot of the address right away, which already made him stand out. I've gone on dates where dudes make me guess which bar they're talking about like we're on a scavenger hunt. So this was promising. I got there about 5 minutes early, sat at the bar, ordered a gin and tonic, and texted my best friend something like, if he says blockchain before I finish this drink, I'm out. That message ended up being prophecy. Josh walked in right on time, wearing a jacket he probably thought looked effortless, but was definitely ironed like twice. Glasses, clean sneakers, and the kind of posture that screamed, I used to get yelled at in band practice. He smiled when he saw me, gave a very non-creepy hug, and asked what I was drinking. We ordered another round, and I was actually feeling kind of hopeful. First 5 minutes, solid. He asked me how my week was, told me the view from the rooftop reminded him of his last trip to Lisbon. I asked what he did for work, and that's when everything flipped. He straightened up a little and said, so I run a crypto consulting brand/educational platform, which sounds like a bunch of words someone jammed together to sound impressive. I tried to nod along like I knew what that meant, but before I could even say anything back, he launched into a full-on pitch. Not a conversation, not even an explanation. A pitch. He started talking about Web3 like it was a religion. Said it's not just the future, it's a total rewire of how we think about value. I was sipping my drink slowly, hoping he'd take the hint and slow down, but he was already pulling out his phone to show me graphics. Actual pie charts. On a first date. He opened the slideshow app and showed me user retention metrics for this coin he helped develop. I don't even remember the name of it. Something like DeGield or Metastack. All I know is he was describing it with words like decentralized liquidity and market resilience patterns, and I was just sitting there nodding while mentally debating what kind of nachos I was going to get on the way home. He asked me what my thoughts were on smart contracts. I said I didn't really have any. He laughed and said, that's okay, most people don't understand it yet. That's why I do what I do. Bro said it like he was an evangelist trying to save the lost. I tried to steer the convo back to something normal. Asked what shows he was into. He said, I actually don't watch a lot of TV. I feel like passive entertainment distracts from scalability. What does that even mean? I tried music. He said he listens to podcasts exclusively. Guess what kind? Tech entrepreneurship and crypto theory. Of course. I asked if he had any hobbies outside of work, and he said, I mean, my work is kind of my passion. It's not a 9 to 5. It's a 24/7. Dude didn't even blink when he said that. He was proud of it. At one point, I excused myself to the bathroom just to breathe for 2 minutes. When I came back, he'd already ordered us 2 more drinks, which would have been sweet if I hadn't been actively planning my exit. He started telling me about his networking philosophy and how he sees dating as part of building long-term synergy. Said romantic relationships should be aligned with brand potential. I swear on my life, he used the phrase brand potential in the middle of the first date. He asked what I did, and I told him I worked in social media management. He nodded and immediately asked how many followers I had across platforms. When I told him I didn't really keep track, he looked almost disappointed. Said something like, "You got strong energy. You should be capitalizing on that." I wanted to vanish into my drink. "Then this is where I almost walked out," he said. "Honestly, I only date women who bring something to the table. Like if she's not her own brand, we probably don't align." And then he smiled like he just dropped the mic. I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. Just started collecting my stuff. He asked if I was leaving because I was feeling overwhelmed by the potential of the conversation. I told him no. I was leaving because I didn't want to listen to a business seminar on a rooftop with a stranger who sees dating as a merger. He tried to laugh it off, said he liked women who challenged him. I said, "Good luck with your metrics," and walked off. He messaged me the next day. No apology, no awareness. Just a screenshot of some coin hitting a new value, a caption that said, "Told you." I blocked him. The man who treated a date like a TED Talk and expected me to leave inspired. So this one starts with me standing in line at a grocery store trying to decide if I should buy name brand cereal or just get the knockoff one and accept that it'll taste like sadness. That's when I got the text from Kelly confirming our dinner plans. I'd almost forgotten we had a date because we hadn't talked much that week. Not in a ghosting way, just in a she only replies once a day and always at weird times kind of way. We'd matched on an app maybe 6 days before. Her profile said something about plant-based everything and climate activist, which I figured just meant she was probably into yoga and would judge me a little for liking cheese. I didn't really think twice about it. She was cute, had one of those nose rings that everyone's wearing now, and her photos were mostly her standing on cliffs or sitting cross-legged with her eyes closed. One said soul over skin, and I still don't really know what that means. Anyway, I picked a restaurant, and she immediately said she couldn't eat there because they served meat and dairy, and she couldn't be in a space that normalized animal violence. So I said fine, pick the place. She sent me the name of this vegan cafe I had never heard of. And when I looked it up, the first review just said, "Prepare to be converted." That should have been my sign. I got there early, and the place was what you'd expect. Chalkboard menus, walls painted with quotes from activists, plants hanging from the ceiling in macrame baskets. Everything smelled faintly like cinnamon and flaxseed. I sat near the back, next to a big window covered in flyers for workshops with names like Unlearn the Farm and Mushroom Consciousness 101. Kelly walked in 10 minutes late, carrying a big canvas bag with "Meat is Murder" written on it in red letters. She was wearing a long flowy skirt, boots that looked like they used to be combat boots but had since retired, and a shirt with a cartoon cow hugging the planet. She smiled and gave me a little wave, sat down across from me, and immediately asked if the chair I picked had been cleansed. I asked what that meant, and she said, "Never mind, I'll just do it." Then she took out this little spray bottle from her bag and sprayed the chair and her hands with something that smelled like vinegar and mint. I tried to play it cool. I figured, hey, maybe she's just cautious or whatever. Germs, vibes, who knows. The waiter came over, handed us menus, and before he could even ask about drinks, Kelly asked if the milk used in their almond milk was local. The guy kind of blinked and said, "Well, it's almond milk, so it's not dairy." And she goes, "Yes, I'm aware. But the almonds, where were they sourced?" The dude had no idea. He looked like a college student just trying to pay rent, and here's Kelly grilling him about agricultural ethics like this was a Senate hearing. He said he'd ask, and she told him not to bother, that she could taste colonialism. That was word for word. She closed the menu and said she wouldn't be ordering anything that involved almonds, soy, or coconut, because all three were industrially manipulated crops. She said the only thing on the menu she felt spiritually safe consuming was a beet and quinoa salad with no dressing. I said I was still planning to eat, and she gave me this look like I just kicked a puppy. I ordered a vegan burger and tried to pretend this was normal. While we waited, she launched into this whole thing about her food politics. Told me she hadn't eaten processed sugar in 3 years and that her gut bacteria had names. I asked what that meant, and she said she communicates with them and feeds them based on what they ask for. I didn't know how to respond to that, so I just nodded and tried to focus on the wall art. One canvas said, "Drink water, eat rage." I had questions. When the food came, she took a picture of her plate, held her hands over it for about 10 seconds like she was absorbing energy from the beats, then said, "Okay, now it's safe." I bit into my burger and it was actually decent. Tasted like lentils and regret, but in a good way. She didn't eat much, just kept talking. Said she was working on a zine about almond milk and its connection to land trauma. Said people didn't understand that almond farming was the new oil. I asked if that was like a metaphor. She said no. Then she started talking about oat milk and how it was slightly better, but still rooted in Western frameworks. I made the mistake of asking what milk was okay, and she said she sometimes makes her own from pumpkin seeds she grows herself in a shared garden community, but only if she's feeling in alignment. The waiter came back to check on us, and she asked if the almond milk they used in the cafe was Californian. He said yes, kind of hesitantly. That's when she lost it. She stood up, pointed at the chalkboard menu where it said local ingredients, and said, "This is how lies are normalized." Everyone in the cafe turned. She wasn't yelling exactly, but she had that intense voice people use when they're about to lead a protest. She went off about the almond industry, about stolen water, about bee populations, about corporate greenwashing. She kept using the phrase dairy mimicry like it was a slur. The poor waiter just stood there holding his little notepad, looking like he was about to pass out. Eventually, the manager came over and asked if everything was okay. Kelly said no, absolutely not, and started listing off every menu item that offended her worldview. I tried to disappear into the booth. I wasn't even embarrassed, I was just tired. Tired in a way that made me wonder if I was being punished for something in a past life. After about 5 minutes of monologuing, she turned to me and said, "We should go. We're endorsing a false narrative by sitting here." I told her she was free to leave. She asked if I was coming with her. I said no, I was finishing my burger. She stared at me for a second, shook her head, and said, "You're still asleep," then grabbed her bag and stormed out. The entire cafe watched her go. Someone at the table behind me whispered, "That was intense." I nodded and took another bite. The waiter came back and asked if I needed anything. I told him just the check. He laughed and said, "Honestly, man, you handled that like a pro." I met Derek because my cousin owed me a favor. She works in events and knows everyone. DJs, photographers, bar owners, random weirdos who only show up for rooftop launch parties. I was at her apartment one night, complaining about how dating apps made me feel like I was stuck in a never-ending game of dodgeball where the balls are guys saying you up. And she said she knew someone who was different. She said Derek was smart, funny, kind of artsy, and going through a transitional phase, which I probably should have asked more questions about. But I was tired of swiping and honestly just wanted to go out and have a face-to-face conversation with someone who wasn't trying to sell me protein powder or ask for feet pics. She sent him a number. He texted me that same night. Very normal, nothing cringe. Just, "Hey, I'm Derek. Your cousin says we get along. Want to grab a drink this weekend?" I was like, sure, why not? He picked a bar in the Arts District, the kind of place where everything is reclaimed wood and half the drinks have ingredients like basil foam or burnt orange essence. I've been there once before. It's chill, kind of dimly lit, decent cocktails, a little loud, but whatever. I got there first and grabbed a small table near the back. The waitress brought me water. I ordered a drink, and then I saw him walk in. And I swear to you, the first thing I noticed, before I even saw his face, was the shirt. It was a plain white t-shirt with a giant photo printed on the front. Not like a cool graphic. A literal photograph, full color, centered, of a girl. At first, I thought maybe it was a celebrity, like some kind of vintage throwback tee. But then he got closer and I could tell it was just a regular photo. It looked like a senior portrait. You know the kind. Soft lighting, head tilted slightly, smiling at nothing. Hair curled, lip gloss popping. He walked up to the table, gave me a big grin and said, "Hey, sorry I'm a little late." And I just stared at the shirt because the girl was staring right back at me. I didn't even sit down right away. I asked, "Who's that?" while pointing at his chest. He glanced down and casually said, "Oh, why, X? I wear this on dates now." I blinked. You wear your ex's face to meet new people. He nodded like this was totally regular. pulled out his chair, sat down, and took a sip of the water the waitress had left for me. "It's not a weird thing," he said, like that would clear everything up. "It's actually for accountability." I was still standing, trying to decide if I should sit or run, but curiosity got the better of me, so I sat, and I asked him what he meant by accountability. He leaned back in his chair, looked super calm, and said, "So after we broke up, I realized I tend to fall too fast. Like I meet someone new and I forget everything I learned. This keeps me grounded. It's like, don't make the same mistake twice." I was like, "Is this a support group or a date?" He said he'd made 3 versions of the shirt, one with her face, one with a text message she sent him when she dumped him, and one with a photo of them together at a carnival where she looks miserable. He only wears the face one on dates. He said it's his early filter. If someone can't handle it, then they're probably not a match. I said, "That's one way to find out," and he smiled like I passed a test. Then he ordered a drink, something with rum and some herb I couldn't pronounce, and said he didn't like to hide the messy parts. He said modern dating is too much smoke and mirrors, too much pretending you're over stuff you're clearly not. And instead of pretending, he just owned it. Look, I'm not against honesty. Be open, be real, cool. But wearing your ex's literal face like a sports jersey. On a first date, that's not real. That's a performance. I asked him if he was still in love with her, and he said, "No, not in love." But she left a mark. A mark? Bro, that's not a mark. That's a billboard. We got our drinks and he kept talking about her. Not like he was pining. More like he was doing a character study. Told me how she taught him to cook, how they fought over board games, how she hated the way he clipped his nails in bed. He laughed when he said that part. I was trying to laugh too, but I was mostly just watching the giant photo on his chest glow under the bar lights like she was haunting me. I tried to pivot. Asked him what he did for work. He said he was in creative consulting, which means nothing, but he said it confidently. I asked him what that involved, and he said, mostly helping brands feel more like people, again, means nothing. I asked him if he'd ever thought about maybe not bringing his ex to dates in shirt form. He said he considered it, but then he went on one date without it and said it didn't feel authentic, like the shirt was his emotional security blanket. I said, "What happens if things go well with someone?" He said, "Then we can retire the shirt together." Oh my God. We stayed maybe 40 minutes. I couldn't stop glancing at the shirt. It was like trying to eat dinner with a photo album open in front of you. She just stared at me the whole time, smiling faintly like she knew something I didn't. When the check came, he offered to split it. I was like, yeah, that's fine. I couldn't even be annoyed. I was too busy wondering if he had a whole drawer of ex-merch at home. We walked out and he hugged me goodbye, kind of awkward because of the giant face between us, and said, "This was actually really refreshing. You didn't flinch." I got in my car and sat there for a solid minute just processing. Like, is this the future of dating now? Are we all just trauma cosplayers? Do I need to print a shirt of every mistake I've made and wear it to Applebee's? This happened during that weird part of the year when you're not sure if it's still late summer or early fall. You wear a hoodie in the morning and regret it by lunch. I remember because I was sweating through mine while trying to parallel park outside this overpriced little gastropub downtown, thinking to myself, please let this be a normal one. I'd matched with Tina about a week earlier. I was in one of those moods where you tell yourself, maybe I've been too picky, and then you start swiping on people who you'd normally skip just because they seem different. Not bad, different, just off the usual grid. Her profile had a lot going on. Quotes about speaking truth to power. Pictures of her holding megaphones, a bio that said revolutionary energy only. She had this one pic of her standing on top of a crate yelling at a crowd of the sign that said, "The system fears my voice. I didn't totally get it, but I figured, hey, at least she's passionate about something." She messaged first, which I respected. Said she liked my vibe and that my face looked quietly intelligent. I still don't know what that means, but I rolled with it. She had big opinions right away. Told me the dating apps were designed to divide us emotionally. Said small talk was a tool of social control, and that she didn't believe in traditional first dates, but would entertain the concept if the setting didn't feel like a sellout. Again, I probably should just unmatched, but I was curious. People like Tina don't show up often. She's the kind of person you either vibe with or end up writing a weirdly long story about later. Obviously, I didn't vibe. She picked the place. Said she liked that they had locally sourced everything and that the owner had at least attempted to divest from major food monopolies. I didn't know if that was true or not, but I was already committed. When I got there, she was waiting outside, wearing a denim jacket covered in hand-sewn patches and pins with things like "No justice, no brunch," and "Eat the rich but make it gluten-free." She hugged me like we'd already met before and told me I looked more approachable in person. Again, don't know what that means. We went inside and sat down. The waitress came over and Tina immediately asked if they had any employee ownership programs. The waitress looked confused and said, "I think the owner's name is Greg." Tina nodded like she was disappointed but not surprised. I ordered a beer. Tina got hot water with lemon and said alcohol dulled the urgency of the moment. I tried to smile and say something chill like, "So, what kind of stuff are you working on right now?" And she launched into this 10-minute explanation about a community-led documentary project about trash collection inequality in wealth-gapped zip codes. I was impressed, honestly. She knew her stuff. She wasn't just loud, she was informed. But I could already feel the conversation wasn't gonna land anywhere neutral. Then, right when our food came, I had a burger, she got a raw vegetable plate that looked like a sad science experiment. A guy at the table next to us said something about the mayor. I didn't even catch what it was, just some offhanded comment about policy or crime or something. Tina sat up straight. I felt the vibe shift instantly. She turned to the guy, total stranger, and said, "What did you just say?" The dude blinked and was like, "Sorry." And she goes, "You just mentioned the mayor. What exactly is your stance on the corporate policing system that props up the illusion of public safety?" I wish I was exaggerating. I wish I made that line up. But I read it back to myself as soon as she said it, word for word. The guy kind of laughed awkwardly and said he wasn't trying to debate over dinner. And that's when Tina stood up. Like fully stood up in the middle of the restaurant. She started talking, not yelling exactly, but loud enough for every table in that place to go quiet. She went on about systemic bias, food deserts, city contracts, tax money being weaponized against marginalized bodies. I was still holding a half-bitten burger. People were turning their chairs to watch. The waitress was frozen in the corner like she wasn't sure if she should step in or grab a fire extinguisher. And then she looked down at me and said, "Can you record this?" I didn't even move. I just stared at her. She repeated it. "Can you film this? I want people to see what resistance in real time looks like." I told her I didn't really feel comfortable filming strangers without their permission, and she looked at me like I just asked for ketchup at a steakhouse. She said you supported change. This is change happening." The guy she was yelling at stood up and left. His date looked like she wanted to sink into the floor. The whole restaurant was quiet for a second, and then people slowly went back to their meals like nothing happened. Tina sat back down, took a breath, and said, "I probably should have gone harder." I tried to say something to reset, asked about her favorite books or how she got into activism, but she waved it off. Said dinner conversations should never be apolitical, and if I wasn't ready to confront the rot, then it wasn't someone worth emotional investment. At that point, I just said I had to get up early. She nodded and said I figured. No anger, no sadness, just like it was all part of the script. I paid my half of the bill and dipped. She didn't follow up, didn't text. I checked her Instagram the next day, and she posted a photo of herself standing outside the restaurant with the caption, "Spoke truth to indifference. No regrets." That was Tina, who asked me to film her political monologue mid-burger and treated my silence like betrayal.